just me, or are we less people? Slightly less. Okay. All right. Now, maybe just something to say about these mental factors. They are important and they are studied, but it is, well, how can I say that? It's kind of obvious that they're not that precise, as in like, it's just hard to really, if you say there are like 84,000 different ones, I mean, it's not literally 84,000 different ones, there are so many, but 84,000 is just a high number in Tibetan. Tibetans are not that mathematic about things sometimes. I mean, it's like 100 doesn't mean really literally 100, okay? Countless doesn't literally mean countless, and 84,000 just means a lot. Okay? So
when
then
they say countless eons, they mean count. They mean counted eons.
you can be countless is actually a number. So countless doesn't literally mean countless. 84,000 different mental factors doesn't literally mean there are 84,000. There's just so many different types. So it's quite straightforward. There's a sense consciousness, there's a mental consciousness. That can be easily defined. Conceptual, non-conceptual, wrong, correct. But then saying this much is the mental factor of faith, this much is the mental factor, very difficult. It's just to get to know these different faculties more than anything else. So not so much about it's exactly this and not that. And also, in terms of the vocabulary, of course, we're borrowing words from the English, and the words just help me to communicate these mental factors to you. We were just talking about this on the way from lunch. Well, faith, for instance, it can easily be misunderstood, and it means something different in a specific context. So what's most important is what the mental factor refers to, and to get a sense I can recognize that in myself, rather than thinking, oh, why is it called this, why is it called that? I have to call it something, right? And the difficulty is sometimes we may get caught up in the words that are used. But when we study this, and this is a natural human reaction, whenever we study this, our teachers will also remind us, and the texts remind us, don't get caught up in the words. Look at what's behind the word. The word is just given. Okay? So if I say faith, for instance, well, what does it actually mean? What's the idea behind it? Okay. Now going back to the mental factors, we went through faith, shame, consideration, non-attachment, all the way to non-ignorance, okay? And again, like I said, not that clear. What is that non-attachment? Is it detachment? Non-ignorance, is that wisdom? Not clearly laid out, but there is a mental factor such that can be possibly non-affected by ignorance. All right. Diligence, very important. Diligence. It's a joyful mind. It's a mental factor that delights in engaging in virtuous actions. Like I mentioned before, joy is very important when practicing, the Dharma in this case, practicing meditation, practicing virtue. It needs to be joyful. Of course, there can be hardships, but if there's a hardship, it doesn't mean you can't experience joy. You can joyfully experience hardship, or have a deep sense of satisfaction and still go through the difficulty. Okay. So diligence. Diligence keeps you going. Sometimes it's translated as joyous effort, joyous enthusiasm. Mental pliancy, very important. Mental pliancy. It's a kind of mental flexibility. So mental pliancy is a mental factor that is a mental flexibility which enables the concomitant, the associated main mind and other factors, and other mental factors to focus on an object for an extended period of time. This mental pliancy is quite interesting. Again, the example of physical pliancy, physical flexibility. We're familiar with that. When you're physically flexible, then things are more effortless. You can move smoother. You're less likely to hurt yourself or injure yourself. What else? Flexibility. No, I meant with physical one. What is the advantage of physical?
You can meditate for all the time.
Well, no. I mean, specifically, not specific in terms of meditation.
You can go around.
No, you can't necessarily meditate for a long time just because you can sit like that. Meditation is mental.
Okay, but you can sit like that.
Okay, you can sit. Okay.
You can lie down in the
You
same.
don't have to sit on the chair.
Facilitates a movement. Movement. It facilitates movement.
It facilitates movement. Okay, that's what I like. It facilitates movement. You don't hurt yourself easily. Things become more effortless. So all this is also true for the mind. It's true for the mind. Now, when you learn about the Dharma for the first time, in fact, about anything that you have no idea about, you'll encounter a stiffness, a mental stiffness. Like, what? Like, you really struggle with it. It's almost like a mental stiffness. And as you continue learning about anything, this is not just true for the Dharma, this is true for physics and math, etc. So if you've never learned about it before and you now start learning about it or learn a new language, it's like initially, it's like your mind is stiff. But then it becomes more pliant with regard to this particular topic. It becomes more pliant. First time is stiff. Next time you get more of a feeling. It starts flowing. You don't feel so frustrated. There's movement, as in like now you can apply it to other things. So there's a whole process. And the mental pliancy is considered very important. Through meditation, through habituation, you make the mind more flexible. If initially you wanted to think of love and compassion, it was like, I don't want to think of love and compassion, it's annoying. But then you reach a point where it's joyful, it flows, right? It takes over. So you get a sense of that kind of mental pliancy. Especially with concentration, because concentration is very important for mental pliancy. The more focused you are, the more concentrated, the easier the mental pliancy. Okay, so that's a virtuous mental factor. Well, in this case, of course, pliancy with regard to a virtuous object. Here you can, of course, apply these different mental factors also towards something negative, but they're all virtuous ones. So you can have non-virtuous faith. You can have non-virtuous shame, in the sense like you regret a positive action. You can regret a positive action, like you can feel refrain from a virtuous action because out of, I don't know, self-concern. I'm a bad kind of person, I'm not going to do it, but I don't know, whatever your attitude. But this here in particular always refers to diligence. You can be joyful in engaging in negative action, but these are particularly the virtuous aspects. Conscientiousness. Conscientiousness is a mental factor that, in dependence on diligence, familiarizes the concomitant, that is the associated main mind and other factors, with virtue and guards it from non-virtue. Okay? Conscientiousness is not really how we would use the word, but it's kind of getting the mind to familiarize with a certain aspect, and it guards it also from anything that prevents that positive action. Equanimity. Here equanimity means again something different, not equanimity in terms of our like and dislike for other people, but when we meditate, when we do anything, we need concentration. And there are two obstacles to concentration. One is mental sinking, and one is mental excitement. Those are kind of extremes, opposite extremes. Mental sinking is you're just not attentive. You're kind of dull. There's no spark. There's no clarity in your mind. Mental excitement is too much spark, too much excitement, too much, like it's gone to the other side. So in one case you're dull, not able to take anything in or retain it. In the other case, you're so all over the place that again you can't retain it. So equanimity is a state that applies the antidote that does not apply the antidote to mental sinking when there is no mental sinking, and it doesn't apply, it refrains from applying the antidote to excitement when there is no excitement. Because if you apply the antidote to excitement when there's no excitement, you'll experience dullness. You fall into the other extreme, and vice versa. So that's the kind of equanimity. And that is true for like anything. You can apply this. If there's no anger and you apply the antidote to anger, no, that's not the right time. That may not actually help you. Then non-harmfulness is a mental factor that wishes that sentient beings are free from suffering. That's kind of compassion. All right. Now I know it's not that satisfactory, those 11, and they're not therefore studied to such a degree because it's just more of a sense of those are virtuous factors that we need to develop in order for Dharma practice. So faith makes sense, the way it's been explained, but faith is only temporary, like I said, until you come to a first-hand conclusion, until you reach your goal, and until you have become like the person who inspires you, etc. So it's a temporary state. And then the other ones, diligence, very important. But once you're Buddha, you don't need diligence. It comes effortless. It's effortless. Once you reach a certain level, then it's a spontaneous act. It doesn't require diligence. And so, all right. Now, like I said, they're not that super important, but the next ones are important. So the primary afflictions. Now, what is an affliction? It's a mental factor. And here you will see there's more explanation. We have more explanation on the harmful states of mind, just because they're the ones we have to look out for. So what is an affliction? An affliction is defined as a phenomenon that when it arises with the characteristic of being disturbing, and that through arising disturbs the mental continuum. So really, in other words, that's a very kind of extensive way of saying it just disturbs your mind. It takes away peace of mind. So if you were previously calm and peaceful, if an affliction arises, that calmness is disturbed. So it's the opposite of a calm mind. It leads to the opposite of a calm mind. So they disturb the mind, they unsettle the mind. Afflictions do that. And of course they also create negative actions which cause something cause suffering in others, and therefore causes the experience of suffering in ourselves as a result of that. And it's of course the misperception of reality, the misapprehension, ignorance, which is the root of this. You've heard this many times. Then ignorance, here the explanation that is given is actually of two types of misperceptions or misapprehensions. Ignorance being a type of misapprehension or misconception. There are two types, a superimposing and a deprecating. Basically, superimposing means you misperceive something in a way in which you add a quality to a phenomenon that the phenomenon doesn't have. So you add too more, you add too much, you exaggerate what's there. Deprecating is to deny the existence of something that does exist. So there are only those two possibilities. Either you add too much, or you take off, you annihilate too much, you negate too much. So which are the ones that cause us the greatest trouble? Are we more of our misperception more the one that exaggerate, or are they more the ones that deprecate or deny? We add. Yeah. We do, of course, like when we, from a Buddhist point of view, denying the existence of future lives, karma, etc. That is a deprecating kind, but that's not so bad. It is worse that we always add things. Phenomena exist in and of themselves. The conventional self becomes a absolute self, and so forth.
There's also nihilistic mind that deprecates.
The nihilistic mind, that's the one where you say, for instance, my mind, when you believe that after death your mental continuum stops. So that's a deprecating kind. But that is not as bad as the one that superimposes. So there's two. There's superimposing and deprecating, both. Alright, so those are here explained. And then there are innate, of those types you have the ones that are innate, that you're born with, and we are born with. And they're the ones that, based on this innate sense, there are philosophical systems that are based on that. A sense of, for instance, a self, then you develop like a whole system of a soul, of an ego, etc. That is just intellectually acquired, based on the innate type. Okay. All right, so this is clear. That is explained in those pages here. And then, of course, most importantly, the ignorance that is the root of cyclic existence, the root of everything, the root being that misperception that perceives the I and all other phenomena as existing inherently in and of themselves, being a table in and of itself without someone calling it such, etc. Alright, now, okay, so this, I guess, we have some understanding of those. It's just the basic misapprehension, very straightforward. An object, such as a table, is perceived as inherently existent, intrinsically existent. But the other afflictions that arise from those, they need some attention. So here they're explained in detail. Attachment, anger, etc. So the first 5, attachment, anger, arrogance, ignorance, and afflictive doubt, they are called non-views. Non-views. Which I like to call them afflictive emotions. The Tibetan word is really non-views. They're afflictive non-views, so afflictive emotions. Though doubt, why doubt is counted, is kind of a little bit, doubt is a little bit difficult. Because doubt, it's not exactly a view, a decisive view, but it's also not really an emotion. It's like, maybe it's like this, maybe it's like that. Also here the arrogant, ignorance is also difficult. So because it's here the type of ignorance is not a kind of view, but it's just a non-knowing. So then it's difficult to call it an emotion. So non-view works better actually, not a decisive view as such. Anyway, so attachment, anger, these are first the 6, they're called the 6 primary afflictions, and if you want to be more extensive, then you describe the 10 afflictions. Now I'll explain them a little bit. Again, if you read, it'll be self-explanatory, but the next part I think is most important. What follows now is most important. Alright. So attention is a mental factor that focuses on an object we consider to be a source of pleasure. That's page 53. Page 53. Attachment. Did I not say that?
No, you said that.
Oh, sorry. Attachment. Oh. Attachment, yes, is a mental factor that focuses on an object we consider to be a source of pleasure. Okay, focus on an object, and it either exaggerates, for instance, a car or another person, it either exaggerates the positive qualities of that object or superimposes these positive qualities. The car does not possess. So actually it doesn't have those qualities, or even if it has them, it exaggerates them. That's what attachment does. And while apprehending those qualities, attachment craves for and becomes attached to the car. Wants it. It's attached to it. Now, how does it come about? And this is... A lot of people are not familiar with this because, well, recently His Holiness has spoken more about it, and other lamas have too. But in the past, it was not explained to the same degree as it is explained nowadays. It was not emphasized to that degree. What happens is, with our misperception of reality, the sense that phenomena exist in and of themselves, they don't depend on the mind, what happens is that the next step from that misperception is to then exaggerate a positive aspect or a negative aspect. It's not the attachment that starts this exaggeration, that process. It's another type of mind that then, having perceived the object to be in and of itself this, that and the other, then you start looking, oh, it's positive or negative, it's virtuous or whatever, but positive, negative, desirable or not. And then, because of our sense of inherent existence, becoming mixed with this perception, there's a sense it's extremely positive or extremely negative, or extremely this, extremely that, depending on what it is. And only then attachment arises. Okay? Only then attachment arises. So you have this, it's called inappropriate attitude. That's the literal translation, but another translation would be the exaggerating attitude, or the exaggerating mind, and the exaggerating awareness, which just adds a little bit more to the object, not just in terms of its mode of existence, but also its positive nature or its negative nature. Am I making sense? So, of course, it's much more complicated when it actually arises. There are all sorts of different awarenesses. Here, really, to become aware of that, you should take a moment when there's strong attachment in your mind. Go back. How did I get to this attachment? What was the moment before that? Before I grew attached, where was that mind? Try to recognize the mind that exaggerated certain qualities. And then even before that, what was the misperception? Okay? And they kind of, one giving rise to the next, and it's pretty smooth. It's not like, oh, attention, now's the misperception. Oh, now it's not like they announce themselves. It's not as clearly laid out as it's described here. So this really slows down this process. We are super quick in generating those different awarenesses and that resulting in attachment or desire. Sometimes it takes a while before we become attached, and sometimes it's very quick. So, therefore, first, here, what it says is the first is ignorance apprehending the intrinsically existent I, the intrinsically existent car, the intrinsically existing positive qualities of the car. So, you apprehend all these different aspects about you being the owner of the car being that. All of those are very quickly, I mean, just some seconds, or sometimes it's not even necessary for it to arise, because it was there before, and still causes the remaining perceptions. So those misperceptions then induce other wrong perceptions, such as the awareness that perceives the car as being permanent, as being something more solid than it actually is, as being the nature of happiness. That's also really important. Having a sense that this can really give me happiness. And again, this is where it becomes so tricky. People say, I don't think that, right? I don't think the car is giving me lasting happiness. Now, of course, there is a type of mind, the mind of mind we can recognize. If I ask you, is the car going to give you lasting happiness? You go, no, of course not. Because there's a type of awareness, our intellectual understanding, and that's the one that's generated when I ask you, for instance. That's not the one that drives our actions. You just need to, for instance, when you wish something really badly, there's a real craving, then you need to look. There is this much deeper kind of mind that gives you a sense, if I had that, I would really be happy. If I just had that, right? You catch yourself thinking, if I just had that. And that mind actually thinks, then things will be okay. Of course they wouldn't be okay. There's going to be new problems. But that kind of mind gives us that impression, that's all I need. It feels like that's all I need. And of course when you get it, then you need something else. So you see, that is the kind of mind that I'm talking about. It's much subtler. It's much more emotionally affected by more emotions, harder to recognize. And that is the one that promises us, that's really giving me happiness. If I was just with that person, my life would be all right. If I just had that car, things would be okay, right? It's kind of like, there are these split seconds where you have those thoughts, and then it goes away. But because we had that, it leaves some strength. There's some strength there that now motivates us to work very hard to get that object, right? Leave aside anything, get that. Okay, that's the force of attachment. All right. And then when we don't get it, we're unhappy. When we have it, we worry we lose it. And a lot of suffering actually comes forth. I mean, I think a very good example is when we have attachment towards another person. The degree of happiness and the degree of worry, which was greater? Worry. Much more worry. Much more worry. And still we have a sense, if we could just get that object, we could be happy. So that's a misperception of perceiving that as being able to give us lasting happiness. All right, so these are all these little misperceptions that are very tricky, and recognizing them is very challenging, very difficult. Okay, so anyway, out of this initial misperception, then there is the sense that this object is permanent, it's in the nature of happiness, being flawless. The other person, intellectually we know, yeah, they have faults, but we don't see them as faults. Never mind, even the faults we see beautiful, right? It's bizarre. Which in turn lead to the inappropriate attitude, this exaggerating attitude, a type of awareness that exaggerates, and in this case it's just the car, but it's true for other things, that cars positive qualities or superimposes positive qualities the car does not possess. For the person, it works much better because our attachment for a person is much stronger than for a car. So if we have attachment for another person, it can be so strong that we actually create qualities. We imagine them to be there, and that makes us feel better. Right? Oh, I really want this because... So the mind actually sometimes creates qualities that we don't even know the person has. We kind of just assume. We want them to be there, and we assume. Alright. So the mental factor that craves for and becomes attached to the car, to this object, while exaggerating the positive qualities, or while superimposing positive qualities the car does not possess, is attachment. Okay, so first is the exaggeration, and then is the wanting, the craving. That is then called attachment. The arising of attachment is quite different to the arising of, for instance, anger. Anger is impulsive and explosive, but usually ebbs away quickly. Attachment, on the other hand, arises slowly. There's a gradual process of becoming attached to an object. So because of that gradual arisal, it's much harder to get rid of it. This is why attachment is compared to a piece of cloth that is stained with oil. The oil is absorbed by the cloth, spreads into it, and is therefore difficult to remove. Furthermore, the stronger the attachment, the stronger is the sense that we cannot find happiness if we are separated from the object. Have you ever noticed that? Bizarre. It's like if I don't have like the worry, like I cannot be happy. My life is over. With regard to another person. Before we met this person, we were perfectly well. When we break up with them and we've moved past the breakup, we're perfectly well. But in between, we believe cannot live without that person. Again, it's like the stronger the attachment, the stronger that sense. But there are a lot of things in life where we have a sense, I can't live without that. And actually that's another misperception that sneaks in. This feeling is particularly strong regarding attachment to another person. Depending on the intensity of the attachment to the other person, there's the fear that we may be separated from them, there's jealousy when they spend time with someone else, and anger when they leave us. So then all the other afflictions arise. So in the end you can see how so much pain arises, not because of the other person. Nothing wrong with relationships themselves. It's our emotional response that gives us problems. And the Buddhism here is not saying, well, it's kind of saying overcome your attachment, but it's not saying you can immediately. No one is saying, well, you're in a mess, get rid of the attachment right away, and then we talk again. I mean, that's unrealistic. But what it encourages us to do is to at least reduce it first. A little reduction, a little bit more space in the mind. A little more reduction, a little more space in the mind. So happiness can be found not in the way we look for it, where it's in the reduction of craving and attachment. So sometimes when you, in different traditions, but also in the Buddhist tradition, in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, we differentiate between the root cause of suffering and the main cause of suffering. Root cause of suffering is the misperception of reality. Main cause of suffering is attachment. Right? The main cause, as in because it's so ever-present, as like in this emotional state, that much more directly governs our actions. So mainly in that sense. But root, of course, the underlying cause, and therefore what we eventually need to remove. But in some tradition, in the Theravada tradition, for instance, attachment is described as the main problem. The main problem is said to be attachment. Okay, does that make sense? Yes.
If you can put a line between addiction, which is not physical, and attachment.
Addiction is not physical. I would disagree that addiction is not physical. You have physical.
No, there is not based on substance. I mean, of course, it's physical.
It can be physical, it can be mental. There's a mental addiction and physical.
Not based on substance like
I mean, not a drug addiction, not a coffee addiction or nicotine. Okay. An addiction, it's a stronger form of attachment, an extreme form of attachment.